So welcome to Transform Gov, the digital government podcast. It's brought to you by the Ireland eGovernment Awards and it's in association with Accenture. And my name is Maeve Neefsey. And I'm joined today by Huda As'ad from Accenture. And she is going to be talking to us about some really exciting and important things, which are, for example, infrastructure. And we know that that's kind of the engine room of national progress. So I know we're all kind of waiting with bated breath to hear what she can share with us. And given the huge investment that the government has committed in the recent budget to the rollout of the National Development Plan, it's a really opportune time to be questioning not only how much we're going to spend and what we're going to build, but whether we can deliver them really well and smartly. So joining me is someone who knows an awful lot about these kinds of projects. So Huda is Managing Director of Capital Projects and Infrastructure for the UK and Ireland at Accenture. And her hands-on experience spans landmark projects such as the London 2012 Olympics, which must have been unbelievable, through to global sustainability and infrastructure policy. So Huda, you're very welcome to Transform Gov. Good to have you. So look, you helped deliver one of the world's biggest, and I suppose biggest bills really, in terms of the Olympics, the London Olympics 2012. Did you imagine when you were growing up that you were going to be leading such an exciting and high-profile infrastructure project, in the UK?
Gosh, no. I mean, I was always interested in the built environment. I bleed engineering. It's in me. It's in my DNA. And that was an amazing opportunity. I wouldn't say I led it. I am one of many people who contributed to a really amazing program, mega program built in the UK.
And tell us what when you say it's in your DNA, why? How?
Oh, I don't know. I come from a family of engineers. I love the physics and the problem solving and the people element. It's just something that really has always appealed to me, even as a child.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm a family of engineers as well. And I'm the same. If I see a huge, big project where they're building up a big, huge sewage pipe, I go, wow, that's amazing. But anyway, we're in a small group. So look, from your experience, you must have learned, I suppose, things that are relevant really to Ireland now facing some really big infrastructural development. Are there things that you could share with us in terms of what you've learned that could be relevant to what we're going to be doing next?
Absolutely. I mean, London 2012 was an amazing program, one of many, but a really amazing one because it's more than a decade ago now. But I think for the industry as a whole, it felt like a pivotal moment when we realized that having a single source of truth of data was so important in driving efficiency and effective decision-making. We've always had reporting and data. It's something that's a very big part of a big capital program. But I think it was the first time that the whole industry was focused on creating something like a digital dashboard where we could all see the information, drive insights really quickly, and have a level of transparency that I don't really think we had before.
And do you think that it's because of certain technologies being kind of more advanced or easier to use that you were able to realize that ambition?
Actually, I would suggest that technologies we have today are way more advanced. I mean, a lot of our dashboards and data was built on Excel. Now we have so much more accessible, much more advanced technologies. And actually, for Ireland, this is a prime opportunity with such a massive, ambitious program to really sort of mindfully design how you're going to control data, how we're going to use data to drive decision-making, how we're going to build public trust in the things that we say that we're going to do and do them as we said we're going to do them.
Mm-hmm. And what about practically, if you were looking at, that we've got this big budget that's going to go to infrastructure, in very practical ways, what would you do to ensure we get value for money?
I mean, value for money, I always find really interesting because it means different things, but really value for money is making sure that we're always outcome focused. So I think as long as there are basics that are done correctly, value for money can be achieved. So for example, I think there needs to be a bit more, I'm going to call it trust in the public ownership of decision-making. So we need to kind of give people a remit, a delegation of authority and some boundaries, and then trust them to make decisions so that we're not held up by too much perception of red tape.
When you with trust with the public often comes down to very black and white issues. And one of them is, they said they'd spend this much and they spent more. How would you handle that? And how would you face that from your experience in other projects?
Well, I mean, all our current research says that 9 out of 10 projects are late or are over budget or are over budget.
That's not unique, if I may say so, to Ireland, right?
No, that's international. That is actually global, which is a bit depressing because when I started in the industry 20 years ago, we used to say 7 out of 10. Now it's 9 out of 10. The reality is projects are complex and complicated. And sometimes there are political reasons, like we create budgets in a point of time because that's how fiscal cycles work. So actually, they're always going to cost more than we said they're going to cost. So I think there should be a level of transparency about those things. We should also be focused on the outcomes that we're looking for, right? So we want to deliver. Capital projects are not there to deliver things for the sake of building things, much as I would love to, because we're engineers and I'm an engineer. I really love the sort of excitement of building new. But they're to deliver outcomes for citizens and for the public. So as long as we're focused on what the outcomes are, they are delivering the right things for the public, we are empowering the right people to make decisions, then that creates a level of transparency. You can talk about why we're doing things and why things cost what they do. And I think once you start to sort of focus people on why we're doing things, then people understand. I just think there's a level of transparency that sometimes isn't obvious.
And I suppose technology does allow us to have a level of transparency that probably wasn't possible before. And I know, interestingly, we've just awarded our e-government awards this year, but one of the entries was Limerick County Council or City Council. And what they've done is they have used dashboards and transparency to say what they're doing, when they're doing it, against the goals that were set for the council. So do you think that's important to do that for capital investment and infrastructure? Super
important. And actually, if governments decide to do it, it's quite straightforward. It's painstakingly painful at the beginning, it's more complex because you have to set a really good foundation. You have to cleanse the data and organize it in a neat kind of way. But once you've got that, you have a great platform from which you can create transparent information and go as radical as you want with how digital you want to get. You could go from a simple dashboard that has really good, clean data to building an entire digital twin, which gives you real-time information, and you could be like as much budget as you want, kind of sort of level.
And I suppose there's kind of two audiences in a way, isn't there? I mean, two drivers of the project. One is, okay, here's the team of all of us, and here are our goals and what we're trying to get, and we have to collaborate and work together, and we need transparency and knowledge and information to allow us to do that. But on the other side, there's the public. And we could also use technology for them as well in terms of making what we're doing real, 100%. Visually and conceptually.
100%. People think of BIM and digital twins as if they're just sort of a nice to have or a bit of a gimmick. But the reality is visualizations, first of all, help people feel and believe what it is we're going to build. They help people understand what it will look like in their personal space, so it makes it closer to them. And it just makes people really realize what they're going to get at the end of it. That gives them comfort. It becomes an enabler of consenting, not just a gimmick. I think visualizations are super important, whatever technology you follow, because people need things to feel real.
I suppose the other part of thinking about the London Olympics, particularly with that project, you have a deadline.
Yes.
And there's no way you can go beyond that deadline. Yes. So do you think that as benefits is it?
Yes.
I'm almost thinking, can we imagine that we always say the deadlines are not movable? Like, what is it that cause when there's an unmovable deadline, immovable?
I mean, it's a bit of an artificial situation, isn't it? Because it is an immovable deadline, whereas most other fixed deadlines can be moved. I think it does a few things. It does some positive things. It drives really good behaviors because you don't sweat the small stuff and you're really focused on the things that have the highest impact. I think that's a great lesson to learn. I think it also creates a little bit of short-termism. That's sort of on the less positive side. But because everything that the government is doing in Ireland is to benefit our citizens and the nation, then actually it's really important for it just makes all the decisions much more important.
And do you think that, I know that saying, perfection is the enemy of good, and actually getting things delivered. Do you think there was an element of that in a project like the Olympics where you had such hard deadlines, or was that irrelevant at all?
I mean, of course it was. The 80-20 rule kind of applied. You need to be in the good enough space. And actually, I would say that we should not always aim for that, but on a lot of things. Sometimes we are so focused on perfection, as you said, but also focused on precedent and how many times have we done this before, to what nth degree, that we kind of miss the point. And sometimes we should say, in technology, there's one thing I would take from technology, and I'm not somebody who grew up as a technologist, and that is they believe in failing fast. So trying first, trying small, failing fast, and then learning and scaling. So when you try something and you pilot it, you try it out on a small sort of considered level of risk, then you fail fast, so you learn. Failure is a very important part of technology because you learn and then you know what you're doing and you can improve. And because you did it quickly, you have time to improve. And then you scale because you've done a pilot, you've created this sort of proof of concept, you have failed and you've learned, you've got lessons learned, and now you can scale successfully.
And is that being implemented, do you think, more in terms of infrastructure and, in fact, technology, that approach?
I can see it more and more. I can't say that in our industry people are implementing it everywhere because we still have some old school ways of doing things, which I'd like to see changed and sort of progressed a bit faster. But I can see definitely sort of green shoots there. And technology, that's how technology evolves. If you think about how we've just the basics of the technology that we used, how that has changed just in the past 10, 15 years, and how quickly it's changed. So apply that to the built environment. It's phenomenal. There are so many things that we do today that we've always done. There's so many things that we've always done. For example, quality assurance checklists and things that we've done in a very manual way that are so easy to digitize and so easy to automate. And they save so much time that it's almost like crazy not to.
Yeah, exactly. And also they're not in isolation. They can be shared across other people.
Absolutely.
Look, I have to make time for a break. So we're going to take a really quick pause, just a message from our very important person, which is our partner, Accenture. But don't go away. We'll be back in about 2 seconds and we'll continue our conversation with Huda.
Through the power of cloud, data and AI, Accenture is helping the public sector by blending human ingenuity, technology and a delivery-focused culture to turn their ambitions into action. Be ready for any challenge by adopting a continuous reinvention mindset to deliver human-centric services that adapt and grow with your needs. Contact the team at Accenture to find out more.
So we're back after our very short break, and I wanted to ask Huda about the UK's Green Book, which I believe embeds kind of systems thinking. Now, look, that's all buzzwords. What does it really mean, and why is it important?
I love this topic. So systems thinking for me is so obvious that it's crazy we've kind of not really applied it. Systems thinking is when you're thinking about the investments that we make, especially at a national scale on national projects, and how they are focused on outcomes, not just individually, but collectively. What do I mean by that? I mean, when we look at a transport project, usually the transport is leading from A to B. Along that route, you will always have something like housing, you might have some healthcare, you might have investments that are happening for lots of different things that all serve citizens and all serve the general public. So thinking of projects in isolation actually seems a bit silly because thinking of them as I've heard a phrase recently as an omni project, but if you think of projects with lots of different aspects and how actually if you're trying to improve lives for citizens, then you want to think about their homes and you want to think about their healthcare and you want to think about their education. So planning for projects in that way, in a systematic way, fundamentally changes how we set them up, how we procure them, how we drive them, but still delivers the outcomes that you intend.
So to give me a before and after scenario so we can understand what used to be done and then what the system thinking might change in terms of the approach.
So, for example, in the past, currently and in the past, we would specify a road scheme. And the road scheme would go from A to B. But before the road scheme happened, what the reason for the road scheme was to increase connectivity between, say, two communities so that people can access jobs in a different area, as an example. Mm-hmm. But when you go to market and you just buy a road scheme, that road scheme route might change. There might be some value engineering due to cost. Things will happen to the road scheme. And the reality is what you end up building very rarely delivers the original outcome you intended because you didn't think of it as an entire system. When you think of it as an entire system, you say, what I care about is connecting this community to this town And that will increase, for example, GDP per capita, as an example. Very like highbrow thing, right? But if you're thinking about it in that way, rather than just building a road scheme, suddenly all the decisions you make are still about that outcome that you care about.
Yes, yes. So I suppose when we talk about things like digital twins and 3D virtualization models, is that feeding into system thinking because it's looking at everything around, not just that one A to B road?
It's an enabler.
Yeah.
It's absolutely an enabler. I mean, some countries have done brilliant digital twins where for Singapore has created a national digital twin, which means that any urban planning decisions get made based on looking at the entire system, understanding the energy requirements and the demand, understanding, the people flow, the traffic flow. Every decision looks at all the different aspects that are sometimes really easy to miss when you're looking at things in a very individual kind of linear way.
I presume it speeds up the process massively. If you've got that one, as you said, the place where all the truth is in one centre, right? There's all the pipes, here's all the infrastructure, there's the communication system, and I'm going to plug into that. You don't have to recreate that over and over again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's actually a waste to continuously create things. When we have so much data, the infrastructure sort of landscape is full of so much data that we're constantly recreating.
Over and over again. And I know when we were speaking to Declan, who can't be with us today, but he mentioned that things have changed in terms of how government organisations and public bodies, I suppose, own projects as more informed owners rather than, in other words, I procure services to build the road, inverted commas, and then I hand it over to whoever won the job, and off they go, goodbye, tell us when you're finished. Is that model changing, and why? And is there digital somewhere underneath enabling that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that model is changing because I see, again, this is a great thing to see, clients and owners are thinking more about the outcomes. So when they're communicating, they know what they want. I think that's super important. A client who knows what they want. That means that they can get access to data to validate that they're getting what they want. For example, in the UK, the Highways Agency has created a digital PMO. So they are able to verify data that they get from their supply chain before their supply chain tells them. They are an informed, digitally enabled client. And that's a very easy system for Ireland to replicate.
So there's data flowing through to the client from the project. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So as you say, they get it. They don't have to wait to be told. They know what's going on.
No, absolutely. And actually, the clients own the data. I think sometimes clients forget that. When a client goes to market, they specify certain data that they want. There's no reason not to say, I want it live, real time. I want it when I want it, on demand. And these things are not completely crazy. They're totally accessible. And it works very well in other sectors. Why are we not adopting it more in our construction sector?
Okay, well, we'll have to find out. We're going to make sure it happens. So we often hear, about struggles to deliver, and I know we mentioned that earlier on, overruns. But are there examples of other nations who've kind of managed to deal with that better? And how have they done it? Or is everybody still where they were before? I know we're not alone, put it that way.
Yes, I think it's really important to realize that Ireland is not alone, and everyone struggles all countries, all projects struggle to deliver to some extent. I think the research says that organizations that are more likely to deliver on time are organizations that do a few things really well. So, for example, they use data to drive foresight and insight. What I mean is they don't use the data that says, what did we look at, a month ago, where are we today? But they're using the data to think of what is going to happen next. So predictive analysis, super important. And if you ask for it as a client, you will get it.
And what kind of things can you predict? Give me an example.
You can predict things like how often you need to maintain assets. So predictive maintenance is not a new thing, but not fully sort of adopted everywhere. So rather than wait for a railway system to fail or a road to have potholes or challenges, you're able to use analytics and really good data that you currently own to predict when it's going to happen way ahead of time. So imagine being able to know when it's going to happen before the terrible thing happens. So you can plan for it. You can close the roads at the right time. You can do the maintenance when you need to do it, rather than when you have to do it.
I suppose that can be enhanced as well by the use of ways of gathering data about your infrastructure through, I don't know, things. Well, there's loads of ways, isn't there?
There is. Sensors, drones, loads of things. And I know they sound sometimes a bit like this sort of space age futuristic thing, but these things are here. We have drones, currently drones. In fact, we assisted a railway provider in the UK in sort of using sensors and drones. It saved them on their maintenance costs up to 25% a year. I mean, these things are already here.
And in terms of countries other than Singapore, who do you think is definitely a leading light in terms of the delivery of big infrastructure projects and pulling back on that worry about overruns and cost?
That's a very good question. I mean, I don't think any country gets it right every time, all the time. I think there are great projects and there are great sectors. So when I look at even in the UK, the Thames Tideway Tunnel delivered on time to budget, using a lot of technology and mindfully designing things, but also doing basics like early contractor involvement, which means speaking to all the people who are going to build the thing before you commission it, so that when you're commissioning a thing that they can build. Sounds really obvious, right?
I know.
We don't often do that. So there are some really great projects out there. I wouldn't say one country has a monopoly, if I'm honest.
And when you say thinking mindfully, what does that mean?
I mean, by design.
Okay.
I think sometimes we tend to follow a procurement process very rigidly, which of course has a lot of common sense to it. But the reality is that you need to do a lot of we call it front loading. So you need to do this front loading investment in thinking about things the right way, being really crystal clear on the outcomes that you care about, not just the outputs. Being really clear about what your sort of no-go decisions are, what you want to see in the final product, being honest and transparent about your budget, about the things that you care about, whether it's time, quality, or money, because in that triangle, you can't have everything all the time. So you have to prioritize. And just engaging with people at the right times. I think once we establish that as a process and then follow proper, robust procurement processes, your project should be perfectly on time every time.
That's to be a dream. I'm thinking just in terms of, we talk about big infrastructure projects. We've talked about, technology enabling, information sharing, planning ahead. But then, of course, the other part is there's other barriers, and they can often be human. 100%, right? So what have you seen? I mean, tell us some of the bad stories in a way. You don't have to name any names. And then tell us how you would deal with that.
So I think sometimes there's resistance. There's a culture of resistance to change. And I think a lot of this is addressed by tone from the top. Projects that are successful in delivering things that are different in a different way have leaders who are very persistent and transparent and consistent in their messaging, that this is how we want to do it and this is why. So you win the hearts and minds and you're constantly beating that drumbeat. Change is difficult. And changing people's perceptions of, well, this is the right way is also very difficult because they've done it like this for a long time. But as I said, I think projects where they do it super well is when leadership is strong, leadership is empowered, they have decision-making abilities and a good delegation of authority. They're allowed to fail fast. There's no too much finger pointing. Obviously not catastrophically. This is public funds. We want everything to be done in a way that always protects the public purse. But we have to give people leeway to try and do things better because the outcomes are almost always much better than just sort of being too risk averse and following the way we've always done things.
And in terms of experience when you've been doing big projects, can you tell us some of the kind of hiccups that you had to experience and how you might have overcome them in a practical way?
I've been, I guess, quite lucky. A lot of the major programs have not too many near disasters. I think the way I've always looked at things is thinking of things in a way of measuring checks and balances, doing checks and balances on things. AI and all the cool tooling is very cool and obviously great for the headlines. But sometimes if you focus on getting the basics right, things work really well. So working on a particular project where the costs seem to be going completely out of control, and it was really difficult to understand why these costs were going so sort of crazy out of control. And then just looking at the basics, I'll give you an example. I looked at that particular project and I realized that the muckaway, the spoil that they take out of the site, that were taking out of site, was way bigger in volume than the volume of the holes they were digging.
Okay.
I mean, that's quite a basic thing,
That's
right?
pretty basic.
So it was just really quick
find that, though.
calculations. Well, it just struck me as a huge amount of spoil being taken out. And it turned out that they dug the hole, accidentally ordered the wrong type of concrete, and then had to redig the hole and then fill it with the correct kind of concrete. So double the amount of spoil, which obviously was human error to be charged twice to the client.
Yes, exactly.
But if you do basic checks and balances, these things become more obvious.
Absolutely. And in terms of, if you were thinking about the skills, if, for example, you're saying, look, we want to do things differently and we want to do things where we embed technology and transparency and wherever we can, where it makes sense to make it easier, does it mean that you then tend to change the suppliers in order to look for people who've got those kind of embedded knowledge? Or do you find that if you give the brief out, your existing suppliers will then kind of up their game? What's your experience of that?
I love this sector. I love, as I said, sort of construction and infrastructure. The reality is a lot of our industry does not really invest in itself unless the client encourages it.
Okay.
So if you go out to market and you say, this is what we want, something that is digitally enabled, but not too gimmicky, something that helps us deliver on time, on budget, and these are my outcomes, then you will find that the supply chain starts to invest in itself. That upskills people in the industry. It really sort of starts the transformation. It's in the client's hand to start that transformation. And you don't get what you don't ask for.
Okay, well, look, this is just fascinating. And I hope you understand that we're definitely going to do part 2 with Huda because there's so much and it's so opportune. But thank you very much for coming and joining us in part
pleasure.
1 and for sharing so many thoughtful insights into infrastructure, which we're all very excited about because it's going to make a big difference to the country. And also, it's going to be better for the citizens, isn't it? Because we'll all experience it day to day, this new infrastructure. So stay with us. Let's thank very much Huda, but also thank the team behind TransformGov. Today, it's studio manager Peter Rice, video editor Neil Horner, sound engineer Lee Brennan, and doubling up, Lee Brennan is also our videographer. And thank you very much for tuning in.